Hi everyone, thanks for joining for today's tutorial, which I call All of the Dogs tutorial. I'm going to go through downward facing dog and upward facing dog, plus quite a few other dogs that will crop up in my classes and maybe a few other of your teachers. So we'll break everything down, and hopefully in this tutorial you might get answers to questions that were bubbling away in the back of your mind. I want you to know that downward facing dog it's not a resting pose, and it's pretty active, and you will feel it in this position. And there are certain little tips and tricks that I figured out along the way for my body that have really helped me sustain this posture, which we're in quite a lot, for sure. So have fun with this tutorial and we'll dive straight in. Let's take it into downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. I'm not very good at saying the last word and I apologize. So downward facing dog. I want you to think about, before you come into the position of downward facing dog, about your hands. Now I have a great hands tutorial also on my page, which kind of breaks down the mechanics of the hands, how we use them in our practice, and what we can kind of gain from the floor by really connecting with it. Lazy hands can often just set ourselves up for a bit of a weaker practice in a way. So spread your fingers out nice and wide, like big stars. And I want you to think about clawing your fingers into the floor. Really press down the tips of your fingers, and you want to have a slight gap under the middle knuckle of your fingers, like a small gap. And you press down the mounds of your fingers, so the point of the fingers that connect to the palm. You press those guys down and you push. So the action of downward facing dog is that you push away from the ground. So check out your hands. I want you to make the decision whether you want your index finger to be the finger that points straight out in front of you. And what that does is it's a little bit of external rotation of the shoulders. Or do you feel better when your middle finger is straight out in front of you? So there is a little bit of a difference. So the angle of your hands will change 5-10 degrees perhaps. But you make the decision. So claw your fingers down, tuck the toes, lift the knees, and shine the tailbone up towards the sky. Now push the ground away. When we push, especially with the arms over the head, which they are right now, your shoulders are going to lift. They're going to rise up towards the ears. Now, it's not about them sort of locking themselves right into the ears and you can collapse in the chest. There's still a broadness between the shoulder blades, but you're pushing away. So the lift of the shoulders is really natural. And then bring yourself down. Knees down, bum down, because we're going to come into these positions quite a lot during the next however many minutes this is. So when you think about the arms being over the head, you're pushing the ground away, the shoulders will rise up towards the ears, normal things. What I want you to think about next in your downward facing dog is how the ribs are doing. You're going to hear flaring the ribs quite a lot. Everybody is different. So if someone looks like they're flaring their ribs, they might not be. It might just be sort of the natural curves of their spine. Some people are hypermobile. It's not a big deal. But what I want you to notice is how you feel. If the ribs are really flaring and you feel that they're flaring, often the belly can be really relaxed and there's like no core engagement. When you're in a downward facing dog, and especially if you're using this for strength practices, I do want you to engage the abdominals. So when we engage the abdominals, it's not about sucking in, but those ribs will probably pull back a little bit as we turn on the abs and the pelvic floor and those core muscles, which to me is pretty much any muscle that's quite close towards the spine, any part of the spine. So you have your core muscles in your neck as well. So notice when you come into that downward facing dog, if you disengage the belly, just let the belly kind of hang out. And what happens in my body is I collapse my chest. So there is barely any engagement going on. I've hardly really got a good connection through my hands. So I claw down my fingertips, push the floor away, pull the lower ribs in for me so that I can feel that my bandhas, which we talk about a lot in yoga, these energy locks, really it's sort of your pelvic floor and your abdominals, which will switch on here. Naturally I just become a lot stronger and more solid in this position. I can feel how much my upper body is also working to stay in this position, so to not just dump everything into my spine.
Now, another thing I love to do in downward facing dog is bend the knees. Have a very slight bend in the knees so that you can tilt your tailbone up towards the sky. If you find that you are a little bit far forward and there's a little bit too much weight kind of going on the wrists, and you're trying to straighten your knees, which means that the lower back is rounded and the tailbone is tucked, then we need to bend the knees and try and engage, lift the tailbone up towards the sky, push back. And this will help the mobility of the shoulders, lengthening the spine, engagement in the core muscles. It will also help your hamstrings and around the glutes. And when you're ready, exhale and lower the knees and bring yourself back. It's a complicated pose. There is a lot going on, and it's probably the most used pose in yoga. If you're struggling with shoulders, I'm not fully aware of everything that we can do with shoulder injuries. I'm still in my sort of research and learning. However, if you're in a lot of pain, I would come out and rest and know that you can do that whenever you need to. So if you're working through shoulder rotator cuff injuries, they can be a bit of a mystery sometimes. So don't aggravate it by pushing past the pain. Maybe go to the point where you can feel it, and then don't push it too far. So if you need to skip a few downward facing dogs, no one's going to kill you for that one, trust me. I would rather you took the initiative of your body and come down and rest. So that's downward facing dog. And you can put into place all of those little tips and tricks. Clawing down from the fingertips, pushing the floor away, pulling the lower ribs in, tilting the tailbone up towards the sky, a little bend in the knees, in all of these different variations of that pose. Now, one I absolutely love is tiger dog. Now, tiger dog, it's all very animalistic today, by the way. You come into that regular downward facing dog, and I want you to really bend the knees a little bit more than you usually would. You may naturally want to open your feet out a little bit wider and really poke the bum up towards the sky. Push the floor away. So it feels a little bit more pouncy, this downward facing dog. What's quite nice to do when you come into downward facing dog is to then bring your, say, right knee in towards your chest, hover forward, high plank, bend the knees, press back into tiger dog. And again, take it to the other side, left knee forward, left foot back, bend the knees. Take it one more on each side. Staying close to the breath. Keep the knees bent, spread the fingers wide, pull those lower ribs in if you can. Relax the head through the arms and maybe kind of bounce it a little bit here. Lower the knees down and we come back. Tiger dog is especially amazing if you have quite tight hamstrings, or if you find touching the toes a big effort. Bend the knees, push the bum back, and you're going to get that lush length in your spine. So that you know, if you were to pour water from your tailbone, it would just run straight down your spine off the crown of the head, rather than sort of struggling here because you're trying to straighten the knees and you can't kind of like do that without rounding the spine. Bend the knees, poke the bum up, drop the head through the arms. I naturally have a bit of a posterior tilt in my pelvis where the tailbone tucks under and I kind of slouch. It's a very common thing to have. So I like to naturally bend the knees more anytime I come into a downward facing dog. A lot of my downward facing dogs in my videos are tiger dogs. Another great one, especially if you've been working the glutes a little bit in your practice, or you've been sort of building the power of the back of the legs and the bum, is frog dog. Now, frog dog, you're going to take your feet out as wide as the mat and your hands out as wide as the mat. And what's nice about this position is actually I want you to grab hold of the outer edges of the mat themselves. So you take your feet out wide, keep the knees bent, bum pokes up towards the sky. You're holding the mat. Now the position may be a little bit narrower than a regular downward facing dog, but with frog dog, feet wide, working into the hips, tilt the tailbone up, try and almost rip the mat in two. Relax the head through the arms. So this is a really nice position if you've been doing quite a few back bends, or you've been working into the glutes and the backs of the legs, like I said. And you can also kind of pedal one heel down at a time and wiggle it out. Your downward facing dogs and alternatives and variations do not have to be still. For me, they don't have to be still. I love to see people wiggling their hips, moving the spine, figuring out what feels good. Bring yourself down when you're ready. Our hips are mobile. Our shoulders are mobile. They want to move. It's the muscles kind of around these big joints that want to prove their strength and hold us here for a long time, which is when we get the stamina to hold downward facing dog for a while. So it's not necessarily the shoulders, the shoulder joint themselves or the hips themselves that are doing all of that work. You want the muscles to do the work for you. All right. So we've got downward facing dog, tiger dog, frog dog, turbo dog. A little bit different. Turbo dog, you're going to feel those muscles really kick into action. Turbo dog, it's like almost you going into dolphin pose with your forearms down. To come into turbo dog, the action of the arms is you're going to bend your elbows like you're doing a press up in a downward facing dog. And you notice how the elbows will go out wide. And then I want you, keeping the elbows bent, to wrap the upper arm bones and the elbows in towards one another. Now that action is actually external rotation of the shoulders. As you externally rotate the shoulders, the forearms are going to hug a bit closer in towards one another. And you're going to feel the biceps and the triceps hug as the forearms will be hovering just off the floor. So getting that feeling of squeezing in, which will also broaden the space between the shoulder blades a little bit more. It's a great action if you're building up some strength in your upper body, your chest and your shoulders, the upper back. So let's take it. Regular downward facing dog. Claw your fingers into the floor, get a great connection through the ground. Drop the head through the arms and push it away. Turbo dog. Bend your elbows a few inches, like you're doing a press up. Hold it, and then wrap the upper arm bones and the elbows in towards one another. So your forearms and your wrists are just hovering off the ground. Still claw the fingers into the floor, push the ground away still. The elbows are bent. And there may be a little pulse here that you take. And then press back up. Lower the knees. Sit your bum to your heels. And rest it. Turbo dog is quite an advanced posture. It's great if you are just building up into arm balances and for maybe even going in towards 90-minute classes, which can really kick your butt. I mean, all of this really is me talking from a very physical perspective. I'm not going into the spiritual side of yoga. This is more athletic stuff right now. But you know what? All of this is really going to help us become stronger, and maybe stay with this practice a little bit more. I know it can be a bit disheartening if you feel that you're not getting anywhere with it. But these tutorials may be just those bingo moments that we need to stay with it. And the physical practice for me is very much the bridge towards the other side and a segue towards the more spiritual side of yoga. So I do just want to comment on that. So turbo dog, anytime you just want to get your bum kicked, pop that one in there. And dolphin. Now dolphin, I know this dolphin is not a downward facing dog. However, if you are struggling with your wrists, you've got carpal tunnel syndrome, or you've got, that repetitive strain, and you want to take some weight off of the wrists, go down onto your forearms. It's not necessarily easier, but it's you taking some weight off of that injured area. So with dolphin, again, when you think about turbo dog, it's very much the same thing, only the forearms are on the floor. So you're doing that squeeze in of the forearms, and you can take the pressure away from the hands here. So you're on your forearms, you're trying to push away the way that you usually would if you were in a normal downward facing dog, only using your forearms to do pushing. Tuck the toes, lift the knees, shine the bum up towards the sky. Now I'm not going to put my hands on the floor here, just so you can see that I'm not putting any weight on my hands. Now, if you struggle with your hamstrings, just keep opening out the feet a little bit wider. Keep the knees bent and think about tilting the tailbone a little bit further up towards the sky. And you can have your feet come narrow. You can walk your feet in a little bit more. It really does depend on how you feel. Just keep the weight off of the hands and the wrists. Use the forearms. Lower the knees. And if that's where you're having to go, your shoulders are going to get so strong. Another alternative, if you have slightly weaker wrists at the moment, is to use bricks. So if you can use bricks in your studio or you have them at home, take 2 bricks, holding the brick, bring yourself into downward facing dog, push through the bricks, push the floor away, and drop the head through the arms. And you can do some really nice stuff here with the bricks. You can have the bricks there for as long as you need to. You can work through your vinyasas with these bricks. Really nice work with chaturangas. And then taking yourself back. Bricks are wonderful. They're there to aid you. They're there to help you out in times of need, or to even just progress your practice a little bit more. So do feel free anytime to add a brick into your practice, even if you haven't got dodgy wrists. Pop them in there. See what we can get from it. Now, a couple of different things that we can lead on from our downward facing dogs is a revolve down dog and a 3-legged dog. These are things that you're going to hear in vinyasa classes all the time. Now, when you come into downward facing dog and we go for a revolved, it's a twist. So your left hand, for instance, right now is going to stay where it is, and your right hand is going to grab or cross over to the outside of your left shin or ankle. And when you're in these twists, really focus on not twisting your hips or your lower back. You're twisting the ribs. Gaze underneath your armpit, and then switch to the other side. Right hand down. Left arm crosses to your right shin or ankle. Gaze underneath your right armpit. Tailbone up towards the sky. Push the floor away. Exhale, release. Nice little revolved, twisted, downward facing dog there. And 3-legged dog or dancing dog. Lift your right leg up towards the sky. Now you can either have the foot pointing straight up towards the ceiling, push the floor away. What's quite nice here is it becomes a moment for the left leg, the supporting leg, the standing leg. Squeeze the left heel a little bit closer towards the floor and keep the knee slightly bent here. Push the floor away. Now, my hips in this position are a little bit more square. So open the hip, maybe bend the right knee and open it up here. Let the right foot almost fall a little bit further behind you. Now, traditionally, we quite like to keep the shoulders level. You know what? You're probably not gonna hurt anyone if you do open it up a little bit, but it's nice to notice the spiral of the spine, the natural tendencies in your body. Still pulling the lower ribs in. As soon as we add in 3-legged dog, people love to kind of flare the ribs a bit more. Still try and engage the abdominals, tone them in, and switch to the other side. First of all, straight leg, left leg up towards the sky, point the toes. Little bend in the right knee, squeeze the right heel further in towards the floor. And then you can bend the knee and open the hips a little bit more, trying to square the shoulders off a touch. Or maybe open the armpit up. What's happening to the spine? And then lower the left foot down. Drop your knees, take a child's pose. And you might want to open the hands up towards the sky for this little rest. Excellent job, everybody. I've pretty much done all the down dog variations that I can think of. And the last place we want to go is upward facing dog. With upward facing dog, it's like the cobras, but we lift the thighs, the knees, the shins, and the ankles off the floor. What I want you to notice when you come into upward facing dog is the shoulders. So I want this broadness across the collarbones and the shoulders and the chest. But the same thing happens. You can have that sort of dumpy nature going into the lower back. Squeeze your bum, engage the legs, and pull those cheeky lower ribs in. I don't want us to think that these are the devil, because these are lush. When we want to get really intuitive with our body, open it up a little bit. But we want to also protect our beautiful lumbar spine. So engage the glutes with the core muscles, and we'll probably be able to do that funky movement forever and ever and ever. Now, when we come into upward facing dog, come forward into a high plank for me. Squeeze the legs together. Squeeze your bum. Really switch them on. Now, without going through chaturanga, press up. I want you to now point your feet, so one at a time. Use the backs of your feet, also known as the tarsal bones. Press those guys into the floor. Still squeeze your bum. Now begin to press your hips forward towards the back of the wrists. Keep squeezing your bum. As the hips come forward, keep the shins, the knees, the thighs off the floor, and then squeeze the shoulders back, broaden the collarbones, super strong through the hands, push the floor away, and we lift. Now, as the hands are below the shoulders, we're trying to get the shoulders away from the ears here as we push. Drop the knees, sit back, child's pose. Upward facing dog is a beautiful pose, but it's one of those ones that's sort of just thrown at you in a class and maybe it's not been explained. You want to keep the legs off the floor. There's that gap underneath. This feeling of lift. So really it's the feet and the hands that are again connected to the ground. So if you're going to come up from the ground, point the toes, press the feet into the floor, hands underneath your shoulders. And as you press the feet down, lift the chest if you're going into cobra. You may want to stay there, still squeeze the bum a lot in cobra, just so that we're not just dumping all of the weight into the neck and into the lumbar spine. Press down through the feet, squeeze the bum, lift the chest, and you're trying to pull away from dumping into the lumbar spine. If I'm going to dump into the lumbar spine, my hips and my thighs are on the floor. My shoulders start to creep up towards the ears here, and there is nothing going on. There's nothing. So press down through the feet, lift the shins, squeeze the shoulders back, open the chest, and then exhale. You can tuck the toes and wiggle back into your downward facing dog. Well done. Bring yourself down. Those are pretty much all of the dogs that I can think of right now. Regular down dog, work on hand placement, bending the knees, tilting the tailbone up, connecting with the ribs so that we have this luscious long spine. Tiger dog, bend the knees more, poke the bum up towards the sky. Frog dog, open the arms and the legs, get into the hips. Turbo dog, fire up the shoulders and the upper arms. Dolphin, as a variation to save the wrists. Use the bricks if you want. Another way to save the wrists. And work into revolved downward facing dog, 3-legged dog. And then of course, upward facing dog. Someone do a dog word count for me because that would have been insane. I hope that helped. Hope that gave you some inspiration, maybe for your own home practices as well, to add in some funky things, as it might just open your body up a little bit more. Maybe one of those dogs was what you've always wanted and always wanted to feel. It's not a resting pose, but I don't want it to kill you. And if you're struggling with shoulders at the moment, take a break. Take a bit break, rehab it, and come back when you're ready. Sorry, I can't give any more advice on that one, but other people do. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, and of course, subscribe to my channel. Thanks very much, guys. All the best.